My first thought was, does ranking this after not watching it in the theater in 3D hurt it? And it may have, I suppose, because for those of you who remember when it came out, this movie was one of the first and probably the best to use 3D technology. Honestly, until Avatar: The Way of Water came out, it was pretty much unmatched. The only other one that I can think of that comes close to it is Life of Pi. And I don't know why more movies haven't been able to utilize 3D more effectively. Welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be continuing to rank action movies. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the show, the agenda for the episode is I go over some facts and tidbits that I found out about the movie that I call the potent notables. Then I go to the movie overview, which is just me talking about the movie from beginning to end. And then I do the rank, the namesake of the show, where I rank the movie in 10 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all action movie categories, all to figure out what are the best action movies of all time. And today I'll be ranking Avatar, the 2009 action epic starring Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, and Sigourney Weaver, and written and directed by James Cameron. Now, if you're enjoying these rankings or you just like the idea of reviewing an action movie based on it being an action movie, then please consider subscribing and or following, like the episode, comment. You can send me an email at info@therankpodcast.com with suggestions, comments, questions, whatever. I will respond to you. If you super duper like it and you want to support us, you can support us at our Patreon channel at patreon.com/therankpodcast. Now, the idea here is to rank both Avatar 1 and 2 before Avatar 3 comes out at the end of this year. Now, this movie has been out for 16 years, so there will be spoilers for this. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should watch it before listening to or watching this. Let's find out how Avatar ranks on the all-time action movie list, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So as always, we start the potent notables with the box office info. In Avatar's original release, it made a whopping $749.8 million domestically and $2 billion internationally for a worldwide total of $2.7 billion, which makes it the top grossing movie of all time. But they weren't done, because they re-released it 5 more times in different markets, which pushed the domestic total to $785.2 million and the international to $2.1 billion for a worldwide total of $2.9 billion. And this was against the budget of $237 million, which was crazy high at the time, though it was sort of tame compared to the relative budget of Titanic in 1997, another James Cameron movie. I mean, think about it like this. In 1997, he spent $200 million on Titanic, and then he only spent $37 million more on Avatar 12 years later. It just seems like it always works out for him. I don't know how he does it. Now, the question was, why did he wait 12 years from Titanic to Avatar? He originally planned to have the film completed for release in 1999. At the time, the special effects he wanted increased the budget to $400 million, and no studio would fund the film, so it was shelved for 8 years. So James had this creative vision in his head for years before finally committing it to the screen. He spent a lot of time on the details, like the language of the Na'vi. The Na'vi language was created entirely from scratch by Dr. Paul R. Frommer. James Cameron hired him to construct a language that would be easily enunciable for actors to pronounce, but would not resemble any human language. Frommer created about 1,000 words. So then Cameron said to him, the Na'vi language must be entirely new, as it's supposed to be from another planet, and that it should sound nice to the audience. He didn't want any additional editing done to their voices and wanted them to sound authentic and not unnatural. So equipped with his vast knowledge of linguistics, Dr. Frommer understood what kinds of sounds the Na'vi language would or wouldn't have. Just like how the J and R sound don't exist in Korean, and in English the H sound is unaspirated. So in a similar vein, Frommer's conception of the new language totally avoided the sounds of ch, th, and sh. Additionally, Frommer had to decide on the language's syntax, or rules regarding word order. He came up with his own set of constraints and words to be used in the language of Pandora. The tongue took inspiration from the natural languages of the world to create a totally different spoken form. Now, if that doesn't interest you, I'm sorry, but my oldest is going to graduate college in 2027 with a degree in linguistics, and this is pretty damn cool in my opinion. So, now as for the physical design, the Na'vi were blue to create a conceptual parallel with traditional Hindu depictions of God, like Vishnu and his later avatars, a Sanskrit word meaning a manifestation of divinity in bodily form, such as Rama, Krishna, etc., but also because Cameron just likes the color blue. Cameron knew that their most alien features would be their scale and their color. As far as color, however, Cameron knew from the start that he couldn't go with his first choice. This is what he said. As for the color, green was taken. There was a long history of green aliens plus the Hulk, and the human colors, pinks and browns, weren't alien. SpongeBob was yellow. That pretty much left blue and purple. Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use that for one of our main bioluminescence colors, which we did, associating it with Awa and anything sacred to the Na'vi. So Cameron also settled on blue for another special and more personal reason. Again, quote, also, my mom told me about this dream she had where there was a 10-foot tall blue woman with 6 breasts. Cool image. I drew her, but the 6 breasts thing didn't come out looking as good as it sounds, plus would mess with the rating. So anyway, blue. That's the whole quote. Now, what made Cameron decide that the technology had finally caught up to his vision was when he saw Gollum in The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers in 2002. And yet it still took 7 years before it made it to the screen. Now, I'm going to limit the potent notables here because I'll end up ranking this again whenever I do the 2009 Best Picture nominees. So I want to save some for then as well. So I'll end it with the answer to this question. What's the detriment to having the top grossing film of all time? People sue you. He got sued 3 times in a 10-day period by people claiming he had stolen Avatar from other sources. He went 3 for 3 in defeating these lawsuits. To beat these lawsuits, James submitted a 45-page sworn declaration detailing the ways in which he came up with the idea, including such things as a drawing he made in the 11th grade called Spring on Planet Flora, which depicts an oversized jungle with a tiny spaceman walking one of many gigantic trees with interconnected branches. In college, he co-authored a script about a wheelchair-bound man who surgically removes all external sensory input so he can journey through his own mind and lands in an alien world. And in the late 1970s, he wrote a script called Xenogenesis that included fan lizard drawings virtually identical to the final design of the fan lizard in Avatar. Well, there you go. Those are all the potent notables. Whenever we do 2009, there will be more. There's tons of potent notables on this. But without further ado, let's go to the movie overview. So here we go, diving into Avatar again. Well, I guess not again for you guys with me, but for me, it's diving in again. My first thought was, does ranking this after not watching it in the theater in 3D hurt it? And you know, it may have, I suppose, because for those of you who remember when it came out, this movie was one of the first and probably the best to use 3D technology. Honestly, until Avatar: The Way of Water came out, it was pretty much unmatched. The only other one that I can think of that comes close to it is Life of Pi. And I don't know why more movies haven't been able to utilize 3D more effectively. Either way, I was worried that this might not hold up for me when I didn't have the cutting edge technology to fall back on. But we start off the movie, we get a ton of exposition right in the beginning. You have a whole bunch to get through. And Cameron discovered the way to do it was through scientific video journaling. Now, I don't know if it was the first to do it, but even though it's the highest grossing movie of all time, I think most people would think of The Martian for this brand of storytelling and exposition. Where The Martian followed Mark Watney, Avatar follows Jake Sully, an ex-Marine paraplegic. They get through the explanation of why we're following him quickly in the beginning. Apparently his identical twin brother was a scientist and they've hired him to take his brother's place to not lose the progress and expensive Avatar made for him after his brother was killed by a mugger. So off to Pandora we go. On Pandora, there's a population of indigenous humanoids called the Na'vi and a large corporate consortium that is trying to mine for the natural resources on their land, specifically unobtainium, which is just an hilarious name for a mineral. So the evil corporation is trying to get the native population to relocate from their home, which is a huge tree called Home Tree, so they can dig underneath it. Now, the interesting thing is that from the outside looking in, it looks sort of goofy, caricature-y, like, ooh, the evil corporation, but really it's just human nature. We've been doing it forever and it's kind of disgusting. Whether it's war in the Middle East for oil, or destroying a native population to get more land, or whatever. We just are always doing it, so it's a completely believable plot. Sully, when he comes in, has skeptics in the science team because he's not a brain. But Colonel Miles Quaritch sees an opportunity to utilize him as essentially a spy. A spy on the scientist, but then on the Na'vi as well when Sully gets stranded while out with the scientists in his avatar and ends up joining the Oyatakama tribe. Now this glances over the incredible visuals that we've experienced already in this movie. I mean, the avatars themselves are incredible, not to mention the world that Cameron has created, and as we continue we'll get to see more and more of this world, as well as the unique culture of the indigenous population. Well, unique might not be the best word because they're really just Native Americans in blue. They're like the Native American Blue Man group, except it's the Native Native American blue person tribe.
I think we'd better stick with the script.
Of course, Sully being included in the Oyatakama tribe means that he has become indispensable to the scientists and extremely valuable to the corporation. When the scientists realize that he's giving the military mercenaries information, they decide to move their lab to the floating mountains of Pandora. Now, these mountains, visually, super freaking cool. However, I mean, come on, you really have to suspend your disbelief when it comes to this aspect of the world that was created. Of course, this leads you down several wormholes because they establish that the air is toxic for humans, right? But it also means that there isn't enough oxygen to support combustion, so no fire. And look, in reality, who gives a shit, right? These are storytelling tools, and it doesn't matter if the physics don't work, but you know, they don't. James Cameron takes the whole natives are one with the land thing to a whole new level here, where they can actually commune with plant life through like tentacle things in their hair. Now, I'm making fun a little bit, but it's honestly pretty cool. I especially enjoyed the bonding with Ekrons and eventually Turuks, as well as horses, or at least Pandora's version of horses. I did wonder about the biology here because it seems like everything is very reptilian, even the humanoids, but the Na'vi females did have breasts, and they all had belly buttons, leading me to believe that they were carried and don't come from an egg. But what about the reptilian horses and dogs and everything? I mean, it doesn't really matter, I'm just curious. The crux of this movie, though, is the battle between the evil corporation and the divine natives. What surprised me was that the story actually had their home destroyed. It's a viscerally painful scene and really makes you hate the villains. After their home is destroyed, which causes a short-lived rift between Neytiri and Sully, who have fallen in love, by the way, Sully decides to become Turuk Makto and get all the clans to unite against the enemy. Turuk Makto was a fabled, he rode the bigger ones.
Wow, what a wordsmith.
You know what? You've seen the movie. Who hasn't seen this movie at this point, right? So Sully is playing the role of Tecumseh here. You know, if Tecumseh were a white guy dressed as a native that convinced all the natives that he could save them. I wonder if that storyline would feel the same if they had Idris Elba or Will Smith or something playing the lead role instead of Sam Worthington. Oh, and by the way, can you imagine sleeping with a girl who then says, "We are mated for life now," or heck, the other way around as well, for you ladies out there? I feel like they should have had him do an afraid grunt or something, you know, just for a second. I think that would have been fun. Now, when the white savior comes back as Turuk Makto, all the natives follow him into battle, and we get an epic battle to save the soul tree and force the aliens off Pandora, the aliens being the humans. Of the human allies, we only lose Grace, but a lot of the Na'vi die in the battle. Of course, thanks to Jake Sully and Neytiri, they prevail and kick all the humans off their world, except for the scientists. Then Jake has his soul, essence, mind, whatever you want to call it, transferred from his human body to his Na'vi avatar body through Awa. So again, the physics really don't matter for this movie. If you're gonna have something like that happen, you can't really complain that there's floating mountains, right? But let's see how this movie ranked.
Oh, wait.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting, originality, action sequences, film coherence, hero appeal, villain appeal / hatred, supporting characters appeal, the final showdown, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And before I dive in here, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help us out. But without further ado, let's get on to the ranking. The first category is story, which I gave a 4. It's basically a white savior story, which makes it sound bad, and probably because the savior ring the white guy is doing is to a made-up race of people. I just like it. It feels very similar to Dances with Wolves with more action. I really like the story. The only fix I would make is to make Sully be more of a helpful spy instead of the Turuk Makto. Like, maybe he facilitates Neytiri in becoming Turuk Makto, basically moving it away from being so clearly a white savior story. But anyway, let's go to acting, which I gave a 4. The acting is really good throughout. I have no complaints with anyone, really. I do think that it felt stiff and silly at times. I think Sam Worthington was fine, but I can't help but wonder if someone else might have done it better. You know, I know he'll never see or hear this, but at the same time, I always feel like, oh, it's mean to say. Sam, if you do hear this, I thought you were really good in it. I just think that we don't really get to experience you becoming Na'vi instead of the story telling us you did, if that makes sense. And that could be the CGI's fault too. I mean, I don't know how much emotion you could really show on your face when you're a giant blue alien. So let's go to originality, which I gave a 3.75. Now, I already said this has strong Dances with Wolves vibes. I mean, the white guy comes to save the lives of the natives or whatever other minority group has been done a bunch of times. So from that standpoint, it's not really that original. However, James Cameron's utilization of film technology in 3D is just incredible. Without that, it's probably a 2 or lower, to be honest, but with that, it's nearly a 4. So let's go to action sequences, which I gave a 4.5. The action sequences are excellent. There are times, though, where you get the feeling that you're watching a CGI fight, because you are. For the most part, it doesn't feel like CGI fighting, which is pretty impressive. So let's go to film coherence, which I gave a 3.75. Normally, for a movie this long, I would be saying length, but I never really felt like it was too long. There's only one scene where I remember thinking, okay, this is a lot of this, which is when they're flying on the Ekrons for the first time and Cameron is reveling and showing you the world he has created. But even that led to a plot point about the soul tree, so, you know, really well done there. There are some other questions that came up for me though, like how are they able to get communications through an area that they can't use missile guidance or navigational equipment? Obviously, it's very cool visually to see floating mountains, but, well, I mean, how? Right? Their arrows don't work with the bulldozer windows, but they do with the aircraft windows. Also, it felt like the scaling of things was a bit off at times. Like Sully's human hand looks kind of large on Neytiri's face. Shouldn't it have been a bunch smaller? It just felt like sometimes they were huge giants and other times they just weren't as much bigger as I thought they were. Also, as mentioned before, no fire on Pandora is possible based on the parameters that they set out, but you know, whatever. All right, so let's go to hero appeal, which I give a 3.25. Okay, 3.25 is a decent score because I like Sully. It's not a great score because he's just, I don't know, a little blah. And this is where I wonder about another actor playing the role, but still, I was rooting for him, so there's that. But let's go to villain appeal / hatred. I gave that a 4.5. Okay, so Colonel Miles Quaritch is a freaking badass. He was a villain where you definitely didn't like him, but you had to respect him. I mean, holding his breath and shooting at the aircraft as it flew away was intense. He had a perseverance to him that was impressive as well. I sort of wish the role of him and Sully were reversed. Like, the Colonel would have been a formidable white savior. All right, so let's go to supporting characters appeal, which I gave a 4.75. This was a surprisingly strong point of this movie. I enjoyed all the supporting characters. Grace was great, although kind of a bitch for smoking on a world with a lack of breathable air. Giovanni Ribisi's character is sort of delightfully slimy. The nerdy science guy was fun. I really enjoyed Michelle Rodriguez's character as well. And obviously, Neytiri, she's great. All the Na'vi were great. So yeah, it was great. So let's go to Final Showdown, which I gave a 5. Honestly, it doesn't get much better than this. Great catharsis, formidable villain, and stopped by the right character, Neytiri and not Sully. So let's go to the final category, my rank, which I gave a 4.5. You know, when I started to rewatch this, I thought, will this hold up for me? And I was happy that it did. I remember seeing this in the theater and just being completely awed by it. But 16 years later, the technology doesn't awe you as much. So would the story keep me invested? And it definitely did. Hard to go wrong with this one. All right, so that puts the total for Avatar at a 42, which puts it in the tier Supreme Cinema. And it ended up above Thunderbolts and just below the first Mission Impossible. And I think that fits pretty well, actually. Now, as a reminder, we're going to be revisiting Avatar at some point when I rank the 2009 Best Picture nominees, and I am curious how the ranking will look from that standpoint. Like, is it better as an action movie or better as just a dramatic film? I guess we'll find out when I do it. But thanks for listening and or watching. If you'd like to see an updated list of our action movie rankings, you can do that on our website at therankedpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe, review, and comment, and please consider supporting us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankedpodcast, where you can get access to all of our archived episodes. And remember, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help us out. But that's the end. So, que yiva me. Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use... Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use that one for my... Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use one of our main bioluminescence colors, which we did. No, god damn it.
Take 3.
Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use that for one. Fuck.
Should we take a break?
Purple is my... I can't even get into it now.
Many unbearable hours later.
Purple is my favorite color, but I figured we'd use that one for our main bioluminescence. Fuck, I almost got there.
Come on, man, pull it together.
Purple is my favorite color.